Thank you for a question that I got. I got one or two of them. I will put those into my answers today. The one that I got was from a nice lady in Belgium who's got a great big 17 two-hand horse that she puts that little nervous thing in there and has to go down the road with that thing. Very upset. I would like to point out that your friend's advice that you just, rattle down the road until she gets used to it, she might not. That's not always the fix, folks. You might hear that big thud and find out that you had a horse in the back that just had an ulcer kick up or decided to twist a gut and have some colic for you. So, just about the time you're freaking out because you're scared of the dark and you're 6.5, it's really nice to be shut in a closet, isn't it? And have people bang on the door for you, get you used to that. They'll let you out 5 hours later and you'll find out you weren't hurt, but you won't have a mind left. So these are things that I would like you to really consider, that these are not human beings. They don't learn and cannot rationalize in some of the same ways that we expect people to respond to after they've been given some sort of twisted punishment or tune-up for not being cool, not understanding things. It's really important to be a little bit more compassionate and also inquire a little bit more about what sorts of, get yourself educated and find out what added stress with no way out can actually do to a flight animal's physiology before you start, playing tough guy on the road, okay? I really mean it. I'm going to just not suggest that you do that. It did occur to me that maybe it's time to invest in a bigger trailer. You got a 17-hand Belgian draft horse, and you're running down the road in trailer that is really designed for, a Swedish warm blood or 2/4 horses. If you like that horse, I'd spend the extra money, go to the bank and borrow it, do something. I'm sorry, I will do, in my life, I feel better moving over for the needs of a horse that I've committed to than asking them to do without. I would go to the end to get a horse comfortable because they didn't ask to be with me or you, They didn't ask to go on that field trip, that show schedule, that breeding expedition with that stallion they didn't like. None of that is any of their idea. So let's just make sure that we really try to put ourselves in their shoes once in a great while. Every now and then when we start, you get at your wit's end, you start to get upset with how they're responding to your decisions and your schedules. It's very important to understand that you can push a horse beyond the point of no return in short order. Not mean to. Live to regret it that day and maybe forever. I'd like to talk right now about closing the horses in various types of trailers. There are two main types of trailers that actually, I'm going to put them into three main categories. Two-door trailers that open from the center out when you have two horses that load straight in. There's that kind. You have the typical wide door that's 8 feet wide on a slant load trailer and on some stock trailers. There are some slant load gooseneck trailers that have a tack room in the back, which is wonderful, unless you've got a great big old fat horse or one that has to learn how to back out for the first time on a canted angle and then straighten their body out. If you've got one of these sort of rock hard railroad tie 10-foot 6x6 body horses that doesn't bend for love or money, carrots are the threat of being bludgeoned. You're really going to have a time there. And if you have to load one of those, if it's not yours, but it's a job you have and it's just a job that needs to be done, I would load that horse first so that he can come out last, so that he can have the whole place either to back out straight against that wall, but I wouldn't load a tough loader last in a stock trailer or in a gooseneck trailer that had a tack room in the back. That is a bear to get those horses out of there if they can't back. I know a fellow who had to help me get a horse out twice. We couldn't load her at all. And she was just tough to load. She wouldn't load without another horse in first. That was the last place she could go, and we had to pull her out backwards. And when I say pull her out backwards, I mean full strength. Pull her out backwards without flipping her over. And that was, she was jammed in there within a half a centimeter. We barely got the door closed on any of them anyway. So I've been in some situations where you just plain have to use your full physical strength to get something done and actually get someone to help you. I have found that waiting for a horse to come out, let himself out, figure out how to back up, they sometimes can't. They'll flip over whether you're there or not. So I would just try to not leave it up to them to figure out how to get out of the maze that you created for them, or the dead-end road. So you have the wide 8-foot door that closes. You have a half door that closes on the back of trailers with a tack room or with 2 horse straight ahead. You have stock trailers that have an inside 7 or 8 foot door, 7-foot door, the kind that you can all see through. Maybe you got 2 or 3 horses in the front and in the back. It's extremely important to, you're welcome, everybody. I see your nice comments. You're very, very welcome. You know, I feel I have a guilty conscience if I don't share these things, because honestly, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow with your horse, and I don't know what's going to happen ever to me. I have close calls more times than I wish I did. I'm very, very, very lucky. I'm really lucky person. So many things go my way most of the time, but I've been hurt too, so you just can't take anything for granted. And I just think for me to leave this world with this stuff locked in my head is a gigantic mistake. I would feel that is a regret. It's not possible to accept that level of selfishness or responsibility for withholding information that's badly needed. I'm still sick over the fact that my book isn't out there anymore. But anyway, I'm just doing something else now. There are plenty of copies out there, and I still have some if you want one. Nice lady from Ontario just bought a book today. I have some. I can sign one and send one to you if you have people that could use one. Now's the time to do it. There are a few hardbacks left from the first edition. There are 1 or 2 deluxe editions left. Those are real fancy. Bill signed those himself. But anyway, this is not why I'm talking to you. There's just a limited amount of time that any of us have, even in a life where you're dedicated to it. There's just a limited amount of hours in a life that this is, I hope, this format, sharing it like this, is somehow going to be a permanent way for people to have just a tiny peek into what I've learned. And, you know, it's still my goal to finish my 2 books, or to, what I'm working on right now is to try to, I've got 70 terabytes of data that goes back to when I really realized that my learning curve is something I wanted to document, because I have not always worked horses the way I do now. And I get better as I go. I know I get better as I go because I see my students improve, and that's how you know you're getting better. You got good students to start with, and they try to copy after you a little bit, and then they open for feedback and open for information. Works great. You just got to keep going. But I have a couple of horses right now I'd like to do better with, so I know that I'm reaching into the archives of my experience. I'm reaching into my what these hands can do. See what they can do. See what my mind can do. See what dwelling for a while can do. I just bought a beautiful book. Big book. Tomorrow I'll show you the books I have and the books I read from. No, I won't. Not enough time. I'll take pictures and I'll put them on I'll make a special album, okay? But anyway, you can see from time to time that I can't use it's hard for me to talk sometimes, and so these are the kinds of things that drive me to want to just do this now and get as much available to you as I can. I don't think this is a problem I'll have forever, but it certainly does annoy me, and it does slow me down, and it's not easy. So we're going to go right now on one other type of stock trailer, one other type of trailer that's used, and that's a rusty one that needs a hammer or channel locks or crowbar or pry bar or two guys, or you take it off the hinges. I have done that. Got in the wrong trailer, realized I couldn't undo it, bang that thing off the back of the, what you call it? You bang that off the back of the pins there. There's quite a bit now that you have to think about. Oh yeah, let's see. Leslie, can you discuss what one should do in a situation where you're stuck in the snow, mud, ice in a rural area where you're alone with no cell phone? Yeah, hang out. Bring enough food for you and the horse and somebody will come along. I don't stress anyway. What are you doing out there anyway? I would just not put yourself in that position, number one, and if you have to, I mean, if you've got mud that deep, that means you're in a field. You're not on a paved road. If you're off on the shoulder in the mud, the ice, and the snow, stuck without a cell phone, that's called some kind of planning that, come on now. I'm not saying it can't happen. I one time took a shortcut through the strawberries down outside Salinas. There was a 4.5-hour traffic jam, and I had less than an eighth of a tank left with a loaded trailer, and we'd been sitting there burning fuel and moving along at no progress at all. And I had as a girl that was working for me at the time, really great girl, and I said, why don't we just go for it? Let's go across there and just go across those fields. Well, we went across those fields okay. But mud, you talk about mud, Tina. You're talking about mud? You cannot believe the mud that we had. That mud was so much that actually it almost stopped the trailer. I was pushing a great big barge load of mud. I had to put it into four-wheel low to get out of that strawberry field. Anyhow, we turned. We did make it to a gas station. People were taking a real wide drive around us. That trailer and truck were so dirty, people didn't even like driving next to us in Monterey County. That's how bad we looked. Anyhow, that was probably a destructive detour, but the alternative would have been a lot worse, which is basically stopping in rush hour traffic on 101 and between Prunedale and Salinas, and that was not going to work for anybody in that surroundings, so we did that. So that's my mud, that's my detour and my digression on mud. There are many digressions I could make. What I would like to say, though, if you're going to really start thinking about how to open a trailer door that isn't working, why'd you close them in there? We have to really start to look the plan just a little bit now. Oh, Nikki, that's a bad one. Yes, that was a bad planning job too. All right, I'll hit that one. You want to look where you're going with your trailer and your truck. You want to know what your load weighs. I'm guilty of traveling a little overloaded from time to time. And Nikki, I'll get to the right point on that one. That was a bad one, yes. We got up Nikki's driveway. I'll tell it right now, what the heck. We got up Nikki's driveway, and that was back in 2001, I will say. And we were talking pretty much loose rocks, dirt driveway. Go right on up to the top, they said. Well, once you're committed to that one, you have downshifted, you are in four-wheel drive, you have 3 horses on board. You're really just trusting someone who does not know how to pull a truck and trailer. You have to be careful who you take advice from. And I don't know whether it was a child who told me that or another customer of hers or what. But anyway, I got halfway up this hill. And I was in four-wheel low, and the surface of the road was so bad that my rig was getting pulled back down that hill around a thick, blind stretch of corner there where I couldn't see out of either mirror and I also couldn't go forward, and I put my brakes on and my e-brakes on, and the load I was carrying pulled me back down the hill. Now that isn't so funny. The thing I'm maddest about is that it's the second time it happened. But first time I was in a 1-ton van and a 2-horse trailer. I had no business in that, and I was down in Danville, California. But this happened up in Keene, New York on a private piece of property, and I did have a good rig, but overloaded. Too many horses, too much stuff on top. You know, I like to have supplies when I travel. Do I ever? But anyway, we had to pretty well jackknife that thing right in the middle of a very steep hill. And actually, I think the 2 girls with me were unloading as the thing was. I think we were unloading and the horses were falling out the back as it was being pulled back down by all that weight, even though I was in 4-wheel low with my foot on the gas. The girls were unloading. The trailer was still sliding down the hill in their direction, and only after we got out 2 horses did it stop. Okay, don't do that. Nikki, don't bring up any more. I think that's just our 2. Don't bring up any more like that, please. That's bad to talk about. Anyhow, there really is no point in bringing up all these horror stories except just to illustrate the fact that know your rig, know the power of the truck you have, or your car or your 4-wheel. This 2-door 4-cylinder sedan with the 1-axle, no electric brake, no breakaway chain trailers with 2 horses in the back that is common in Europe. I'm just going to say 3 words. Out of the question. 3 more words. Very, very risky operation. If you are currently pulling a rig like that with a 4-cylinder sedan, even if you have a little breakaway chain on there around the ball, it's just simply unwise. Okay, there's just too much that can go on. You just get one slippery piece of road or one high wind or one horse that's kicking and not getting along in there for whatever reason, or pulling back, or manages to get down on the floor, and you're finished. It's never-ending mess in there. So let's just try to plan for the best by using the knowledge that you can easily acquire on the internet or from going to a trailer place and asking them to tell you what you need to know. I'm not the only person, you guys, who know how to drive a trailer. But the length of the tether that you have your horses on in stock trailers for long hauls. If you've got 1 or 2 horses in an open box, you can tie them in a different way or cut them loose. Horses generally like to travel on an angle or with their butts facing the direction of travel. I'm not sure why, but I've seen it consistently. I think they just find it easier to put their head down toward the door, and it allows them to kind of set their hip into the trip. So let's just, where and when you can, let horses travel loose. There's no harm in it. I've never had a horse get hurt traveling loose, actually, even with a group. But when they're tied, it's really important that you have your horses have their heads low enough so that they don't start to cramp up at the root of the neck or the hips. You don't want that diaphragm and that sciatic nerve under pressure. You don't want the glutes to be, kind of hyperflexed and the piriformis muscles doing too much work, pressuring in on that sciatic nerve on these horses with high heels in the back feet or high inside walls and shoeing that puts the hocks close together. I would be mindful of tying them too tight and too high, too short and too high on long trips, because they're not going to be feeling too good when you have to ride them. So, on the other hand, lowering a rope too much, you want to be careful that it's not so low that a horse will get a foot over it, or the guy next to him will get a foot over it, or that they'll get their rope or under someone else's rope. Those are types of things that are very easy to avoid and very important to think about. Okay, I really do feel that there's enough information and there's enough knowledge out there, collective knowledge with people out there that are fun to listen to, very experienced, wise in many ways, maybe not, flamboyant and showy, but I think if you find the right people, you can even go to the feed store. You go to Tractor Supply or some of these hay fields. You go to a horse show. If you're new to horses, I would say, there is no one valid source of information. And when you're talking about horses and trailering and stuff, one size doesn't fit all. There's so many options out there, you guys. You can have slant load trailers, borrowed trailers. You say you've got your horse ready to go, but the next thing you know, something's wrong and someone helps you on the side of the road and you've got to put your horse in a 2-horse straight ahead to get off the highway out of your fancy rig that's, custom built and all the rest and good in every way, except it's not going right now. So what are you going to do? This is why I really think that I think it's really a good idea I wouldn't train for the test, This is the thing. Knowing horses and training them to do something that's going to make you feel good at the end of the event or the ride or the day or the horse show or the weekend where you're going to go riding with people in a new terrain. You got horses that maybe don't go over water very well, through water or up hills, or they can't lope down a hill with you, or you can't lope down a hill for whatever reason. These are things, you guys, that a horse can do anything. Pretty much anything he can physically do, he can do. The question is whether you involved in that ride and you involved with that episode are going to be in his way and preventing what his natural capacities have set him up to do, or whether you're going to be enjoying it. Okay, so I would not just think that because you can turn a horse around in a trailer and get him out without hyperextending those stifles and causing him to stagger out and damage himself on the way out, even if you got on top of that, and even if you could unload him in a way where he learned how to rock back and just put his foot down like a cat kind of patting on the water, A cat will test something if it's wet and then shake their paw like that. I've seen horses that are pretty adept at loading those hips on the way in or on the way out, on the way in as well, but whether you're backing them out or bringing them out in front, you don't want to just spill out, empty out on the forehand and have that horse, stumbling around just because he's not learned how to back up. There's an efficiency of movement that they are designed to regard when they're left alone as, their key to survival is their efficiency of movement and their willingness to try new things and to be curious about what's offered. That's why, I think there are so many ways to set a horse up to succeed so that he can and not be corrected. It just requires a little more of people than sometimes is understood in the beginning. You just get on some of these DVDs or shows and stuff. It just looks so easy. And I know people tell me I make it look easy too, but it isn't sometimes. It's really not easy. Sometimes it's easier than others. Some horses will make you look just like smooth as can be. But next one, sometimes I feel like it's the first time I ever held a lead rope on some of them. And it's only because I haven't met that horse before. I haven't run into that particular kind of confusion. And while I'm not passing the buck at all, usually, and I'll say it, if you've been in horses for a long time and you find one that's just got you scratching your head, it's probably the mark of the last person who was there or the last 10 people that have been there. He's trying to cycle all this information and all these details and when should I do this and how should I do that and should I look for the release or should I bow up into that pressure or should I resist and pull back and flip over, because that sure used to work. Do they go all the way back to the foundation? I mean, I swear these horses have these conversations with themselves, and they certainly try to have them with you if you're open to it. The horse doesn't forget much. So, let me look here now. I'll look at another question here. How do we brake and accelerate without compromising the horse's balance? Okay, that's a good one. I will say that there's a school of thought that says if your horses are restless back there or if your horses are pawing or upset, just pulse the brakes until they realize they're better off standing still. Get them splay-legged back there so that they can't afford to give up a leg to paw. They need 4 legs for balance. That's hard line. If a horse is having colic back there, it's pretty rude to do that. If a horse has a friend next to him with got himself jammed, or he's got his leg over the lead rope, and that's an upsetting thing, and some horses will try to tell you. I would just not assume that you're going to be a trainer at the wheel and pulse those brakes and slam those horses around left and right and teach them anything, except perhaps to reconsider getting in your trailer again. Try to have some compassion. Pull over when you can. Open that door and see if they're trying to tell you something that's legitimate, and if not, see what adjustments need to be made. Maybe they got a hay net over the damn lead rope, the tie line. Maybe actually lots of things can happen. Sometimes people forget and they cross-tie their horses high in a 2-horse trailer because the other horse isn't in there. They just say, well, we'll just tie him up on 2 sides. He can fall down like that sometimes if he doesn't have his neck for balance. It's really important to remember that there's a whole lot going on back there, and if you haven't had the opportunity to be a passenger in a trailer that somebody else is driving, or to set a glass of water in the back of a trailer that you're driving yourself with no other horse in it, you'll see that there's quite a bit of challenge in it to stand up without holding on, even on a good road. But, ripping over the washboard on these, a washboard, you guys, is a, some people may not know what this means. Dirt roads that are used year-round anywhere, New England, the West, anywhere that I've ever been, lots of them too, they tend to get little ribbles in them, the little bumps, boop, 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 okay? And you can get so that your ranch horses can just deal with it. But if you're just taking some back road into one of these ranches, Douglas Ranch, or any one of these California ranches that are dirt road access, or it could be any other place, Utah, Idaho, Nebraska, it could be anywhere. They have dirt roads that are washboarded out. Washboard because the washboard, it's the shape of a washboard like this where you used to rub your clothes on at the brook or down in the sink when they had sinks and running water. So, driving on one of those, I don't know whether it's better to go fast on those things or slow and just loosen up your fillings in your teeth at every couple yards. I have not, they're just best to avoid those. But when you can't, you can get over and put a set of tires on the shoulder. The other thing you can do, and I've done, there's a real long road like that I take now and again. I used to just pony my horses out the truck up on the shoulder, but not everybody has that opportunity. And that would mean if you got 3 horses in back, you have cut one loose to follow, or you pony all 3 of them. You have to kind of know that you can do that before you just start. Don't do that. Just don't do that. I'm just telling you, that's what I have done on some of these endless washboard roads. 5, 6, 7, that one road I'm talking about in from I-5 to Don and Ronnie's is 13 miles. Lord, that's tough. Like that, every foot of it is like that. So you want to avoid that if you can, but if you're on paved road, there's some real general things that you can think about. If you have to accelerate or decelerate, it sure is best to try to do that on a straightaway. Throwing the horse into the wall or getting him to slip and get confused and have to hang on that lead rope to stand up is a very upsetting thing. They're not looking at the road the way you are. They can't really anticipate those corners and turns. You're driving like you're riding a motorcycle, and they need to be working back there like they're riding a motorcycle, but it comes up too fast for them to really adjust. So they get tossed around back there on these straight-ahead trailers pretty heavily, and even in the slant loads, it's really important to be respectful of how vulnerable they are back there tied, and they've got those dividers they're in. Maybe they do and do not like the horse next to them. Maybe they got hurt. Maybe another horse has fallen down right beside them, or almost scrambling and starting to make a lot of panic noises and thrashing around. These are upsetting experiences that will be greatly reduced if you can be a more conscientious and accountable driver. So how do you learn? I taught the kids down in Novato. I taught those kids how to drive on Sundays in the supermarket parking lots, and then during the week we'd go over to the church's parking lots when they were empty and I'd teach the kids how to drive in there. There's no replacement for learning with an empty trailer when you're young. And also, you want to learn how to drive a gooseneck and a bumper pull and back both up and get out of tight spots. You know, really want to challenge yourself. You go move a neighbor in a storage unit setup. Just bring your gooseneck in there and see how much fun that is, getting in and out of there with their furniture in those spots. You'll be a good driver when you get out of that one. Whether you have a bumper pull slant load or a gooseneck, you'll spend some hours in there figuring out what you're supposed to do. Do your friend a favor. You won't like me very much if you try that, but you will be a good driver at the end. Making turns at high speed, I would make sure that if you've got to make a turn at high speed, it would be a turn that would feel about like a 50-mile circle on a 20,000-acre ranch. I would not make a high turn, a fast turn at a high speed with a trailer. I just wouldn't do it. There are times when, for safety, you need to accelerate and decelerate, but I will mention, particularly in this age of having GPSs, that if you need to miss an exit, miss it. Miss it. Go 5, 10, 20 miles down the road and get turned around, rather than risk your load. Don't risk sliding those horses around in the back or dropping one on the end of his tie line just because you made a bad decision about the traffic half a mile before your exit, or you're on the phone. Don't do it. As far as driving in ice and snow and bad weather, I would say if you cannot easily manage the worst weather conditions in a regular passenger car or in a know what to do with your four-wheel drive, there are courses you can take. There was just one up in New Hampshire this past winter. I think it was a 2 or 3 week course they did. You'll find on the internet there are very nice classes where you can just find out how to pull out of a skid, how to put yourself into a skid and learn how to get out of it. And I'm going to say that driving on the ice is different than driving on snow on ice. And driving in wet, deep snow with ice underneath it is a different experience from a dusting of dry snow on a hard-packed road. There are many, many things that we want to prepare for, and let's prepare for it in a vehicle, okay, before we start putting horses on the back. And the biggest thing that I see going wrong in trailering, once you've actually got a horse that'll go in and stand tied and can also back out, once you've sort of covered the logistics and the training and the getting the horse gentle enough and trusting you enough to actually go through such a procedure with you, you've got to remember you've got a trailer back there. Just try to have that stop sign take 100 feet. Take 100 feet to go from a rolling stop to a dead stop. I don't like to hear, I challenge myself on this every time. I don't want to hear a hoof move behind me. I don't want to hear a hoof move, and certainly not if I'm traveling with young horses, or old ones either, or sick ones. This is an art, and it's a decision to be a good trailer driver. It really is. It's a decision, and I'm going to encourage you to take a trip in the back of somebody's trailer. Let them do a nice job. Let them try a nice job with you, and you just see how difficult it is under the best of circumstances with someone who's trying to do well and knows that you're back there. Of course, you'll hopefully not fall down, but you'll have something to grab if you need to. But you try it yourself back there, just standing up, or even get on all fours, since that's what a horse has. Kneel down and try to see how that feels. And you'll have a much different regard for the challenge that a horse faces getting in and going somewhere. I would say on your ice and snow and bad weather, I travel with snow chains for my truck and for my trailer. Always. Okay? I don't just wait to get pulled over by the CHP up in the Sierras and have them tell me I'm stuck there. I shouldn't be pulling horses in that kind of weather anyway, but if I have to, you don't want to be somebody else's burden, you guys. Just get prepared. If you're gonna have horses and you're gonna load and trailer them yourself, it will cost money to put a decent rig together. You're gonna need all the working parts to be good, you're just plain going to need to know that you've got brakes that work and that you're knowledgeable in adjusting them for the load you're carrying. That's very important, not to just say, okay, somebody set them up when I bought the brake box. No, it's not good enough. You need to first of all make sure that your connections work, that the light is right, that you know how to work that little dial on there if you have a dial, or that you know how to do that little one that goes the other way. There's a few different brands out there, and they're very nice to use if you know how to use them. And none of this, if you have a driving license, none of this is beyond your ability. Don't do the "oh no, I can't do it" thing. Yes, you can. And in fact, I highly recommend that you don't have that response to anything concerning a horse, because then he's not in good hands with you. You've got to be who he needs when he needs it, because the person who knows more than you may not be there. That's it. So you challenge yourself and you get that knowledge, because it's not in the books you read today, most of this stuff. Let's see. Now, crossing creeks, high winds, deep mud. I'd say of all of those things, crossing creeks, as long as it's in the middle of a roadway and there's no sign that tells you that they got quicksand in there, or that you can see it's too deep to go through, been washed out, you'll get through it. Just don't stop. Just go, but don't gas it through there. You just need to use common sense. There is a huge role in this whole thing for common sense, Deep mud, I'd try to avoid it. Entering and departing roundabouts, cloverleaf exits, in all sorts of different freeway configurations around major population centers. Here's my rule of thumb. I make sure that all my running lights are working. I make sure that I put my blinker on well before I need it. Well before I need it. If I have somebody who's riding shotgun, that means in the passenger seat. For you guys who might not have heard that, that's the guy that gets the gate too, or the woman that gets the gate for you if they can. That person has an invaluable role. The first role they have is staying out of the way of your rear view mirror when you need to check the traffic on your right side of your vehicle. That is a person's first job. Second of all, operating that window and putting their arm out if necessary, if you have, as you do in the West so often now, people flying by you on the shoulder or in the right lane, and you're trying to get over. In most states, you're not allowed to drive. And so with me, when I had to load Luigi that time, I had Luigi was a wonderful, wonderful animal. Probably still is. He was a big, one of those Premarin horses, came down out of Canada. He was a nice big Belgian cross, and it isn't that he didn't want to get in, it's that I couldn't hold the door open for him. The Santa Ana winds had come up. They closed down Vaquero days. I think they sent everybody home. They came up about, I think, 80 or 90 miles an hour right there in that yard, and I was trying to load that horse. Two guys couldn't hold the door open, so they took a canvas strap. God forbid, I finally got him in. It was a difficult job, really difficult job. And he was a nervous kind of guy in a trailer anyway. He hadn't had loads of experience. Well, don't you think I couldn't hold that door back when I cut it loose? That thing slammed so hard, I'm surprised I didn't hear it in New York. It slammed so hard, and it shut itself so well that I actually needed help opening it when I got where I was going. It bent itself shutting that hard because it didn't shut clean. Good thing I didn't have to unload him. So we had a drive out of there because there were fires, there were high winds, and I want to say I took 10 or 8. I can't quite remember. I think I took 8. I took 8 east, up by the casino there. And it was 112 mile an hour winds behind us. I mean, that was nice on the fuel mileage, but it wasn't nice getting fuel. It wasn't nice having my door on my truck and my tack room door fly open and break there, so you got your whole tack room sitting open there. Anyway, high wind, I'd stay out of it. Deep mud, downshift and accelerate. Crossing creeks, just be sure you don't have a lot of really fast running water, because the fast running water can mention that the ice and snow, I'd try to stay off the ice with your rig. But really, the main thing is, you want to remember, if you've got a gooseneck, how fast that thing can come around and smack you in the passenger door and pull you right off the road. You want to drive with great care. You want to drive so that your truck stays in front of your trailer in both cases. Not just with your gooseneck. But with your bumper pull too. So I would highly recommend lots of driving without horses before you get a load in there. And then you watch carefully as someone who is good at it puts their own horses in there and takes them in. You need to know how to downshift. You need to know how to use overdrive on some of your older trailers you're like they call it a 3 on the tree. You have a 3-speed transmission on the column, or you have a 4-speed transmission on the floor that's manual. You must learn how to use this. You must learn how to use it, okay? You must learn whether or not in the particular rig you have, whether that rig is really powerful enough to pull in all weather conditions and on all types of elevation and surfaces. I know that it sounds like I'm giving you an assignment like a PhD, but really, when you're out there on the road with a bunch of horses and you're in new situations that you haven't had, there always will be a percentage of those, but if that percentage gets up around more than 5 or 10% per trip, you kind of want to do a little more homework, I would say. I don't want more than one surprise a trip. Even that's a lot. So choosing your tow vehicle, you go look at what the pros are using. Go ask a guy who hauls vehicles to races. Go ask a local farmer what he would recommend. Go ask a local rancher. You have so many good sources out there. Don't just think I know. I know what I know. I don't yet know what I don't know, and that's a lot more than I do know. So I'm happy to see, people thinking that I have some answers for them, but I only know the answers that I've discovered so far. Now, there is the sensitive issue of what in the world do you do when you're loading a horse in the pitch dark. It happens in the northern climates, Canada, Alaska, Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland. I've loaded horses in all those countries in the dark. Never Alaska, but I've certainly loaded horses in the dark in New York and in Massachusetts and Vermont and New Hampshire. Dark loading times or sundown. And if you've got one of these old-timey box trailers, why don't you just stick a headlamp, put it around your horse's chest. Just hang it off his own chest so he can see where he's going. There's nothing wrong with that. Hook it up to the bottom of you hook it up to his forelock. You put it right on him like you'd put it on yourself if he'll tolerate it, so he can see what in the world he's stepping into. I don't see anything wrong with that. If you've got a headlamp in cold country, he's seen it a million times while you're feeding or coming in the barn at night, coming out to do things. So just put one on him or set one in there in your trailer. There's nothing wrong with having 2 or 3 headlamps. For heaven's sakes, you can get them for $5 or $10 nowadays. Put them in there and light your place up. And that way there's not so much doubt for that poor horse about where he's going to put his feet. So I would really try to take care in these ways. But the thing that I would like to get at the moment is a question that just came in from someone about, and I'll make it pertain to trailer loading, because if this horse has to get in the trailer, it will be an interesting and a difficult challenge. So her question was, she has a mare that really prefers not to be touched at the neck, shoulders, head, and she'll tolerate it, but that's exactly what she's doing, is tolerating it. And I understand what it feels like to have a horse that you love tolerate you. Oh, these are uglier, but I can see. I understand what it feels like to have a horse. Hey, Dara. I understand what it's like to have a horse tolerate you when you love that animal. It's just as horrible as when you love a dog or a human being or a sibling that you just look up to and admire, and you just want your love returned in the same way you feel it. It's just, life doesn't always guarantee that, I'm sorry to say. I think if the girl's watching, Laura, I think it is, Laura, if you're watching or listening to this now, I think one thing you might think about is, if you've got a horse that you feel very strongly about, you want to express your emotions and affection, and she's clearly saying that she doesn't want you in her face, I'd go ahead and believe her, and I'd go ahead and give her some space. It gives you a good opportunity to teach her. You say that she's comfortable having you at the hip and kind of at the rib cage. I don't know why you wouldn't take that as a perfect opportunity to teach her how to find you back behind there, just like if you were, I don't mean to say it like this, but you know, a horse can just reach right around and get a fly off the center of their back with their mouth. I don't mean to make that comparison, but you know, a big problem that people have is teaching a horse to change posture, to shift the root of the neck, the poll, the base of the neck, which is so important to all the things we'd like them to do. You need to have a pretty flexible neck in order to ensure that you're going to be able to place those hips. For those of you who are either new to horses, or you've gotten kind of turned around in your understanding of what your horse ought to be doing and why, or what you ought to be doing and why, the reason that you want to be able to set those hips where you need to is because it's pretty darn hard to ask that horse to give you a light forehand if there's no place to put the weight that forehand usually occupies. So it's much easier, I think, and much perhaps a little fairer to the horse to say, hey, look, could you just take that forehand right over here? But if they're all sprawled out to the side, or they've hanging a right hip back, or they're not under themselves at all, it's a little bit more difficult for them to do what you want, to also to understand it or make sense of it. The other thing is, how good do you really feel hauling your horse around, you know, from Sunday to Sunday by the mouth all week, and just feeling like your reins are tied off to the back of somebody's truck and they're going the other direction? I mean, that is just the worst feeling. And, you know, you can get a job done hauling a horse by the mouth around, but that's really not what the whole objective is, I think. I mean, there's so many other ways you can communicate to a horse if you lay a foundation in that helps them to understand how to free up the root of that neck in your direction. If they can't bring their nose and their face back around toward their elbow or their shoulder, that's pretty darn hard, I would think, for you to get any kind of turn that's going to be even safe to ride. If they can't get a fly off their rib cage on their own. So what I'm getting at is, if she really would prefer you not maul all over her and love and cuddle her up, just accept that. Turn that into something that most people would give their eye teeth for, which is a horse that'll bend in your direction respectfully, not knock you over with his shoulder, not barge you out of the way, flip you with her nose into your chest to the back of your head because you're blocking her vision and crowding her all over the place. I'd just call that money in the bank, hang out at the hip, and just start to see how you can make this, turn this into something that's more useful. And I think you're going to find that you've got a really handy horse. I don't know really what your objectives are in having this horse that doesn't love you up the way you want to be attended to, and I'm not knocking it at all. I understand this is a tough thing for you, because the way you said it was real genuine, and I'm understanding. I don't know, I don't know anything about you really. I don't know if you ride, or if she's a pet horse, or if she's a broodmare, or if you compete with her and she's a real investment for the future. So I don't have much information to go on, but let's just say this. It could be that if you're not her first owner, it could be that she was bridled by somebody just popping that bit into her teeth instead of bothering or learning how to open the mouth. It could be that unless you raised her yourself, and we can talk about that, you can write me another email and let me help you sort through this. But I wouldn't just say she doesn't like you or take it personally. You know, horses remember. They remember what happens to them. And if a horse has had, you know, let's say a year or two of rude bridling applied to it, you know, every time it bothered to come up and say, okay, I'll have a look at you, I'll go ahead and love on you a little bit, I'll return that rub, you know, or somebody's gotten them kind of affectionate in a way, and then, you know, that's interspersed with, okay, let's go riding. Okay, and then somebody just, could be they rope her out of a herd. I don't know what her background is. Maybe they just press her behind the ears and they just want to throw her head down there real quick and throw that bridle on there. There's a procedure here now that would be a little more polite if you're going to put some steel in her mouth. That should be to get her head around to you, left or right, hopefully both sides, and teach her how to open her mouth before that bit has to be banging around the teeth. You know, every time I go to the dentist and he starts banging on my front teeth with that mirror, I go get a new dentist, if you get what I mean. Anyway, I don't go to the dentist like that. I don't have any dentist that would do that for obvious reasons. I don't think you could be a dentist and get away with that more than 1 second with one person, and then you're going to be out of a job forever. But you get my point. It could easily be something like that. There are several other things it could be. She could have a TMJ that's locked up. She could have had adverse experiences with needles in her neck. All kinds of things happen to horses when they're young. You don't know whether she might have had 60 injections in there in the first year of her life. Unless you raised her yourself, she could have plenty of reason not to want people around. Anywhere from worming to the way she was handled, you know, in some kind of, you know, innocent enough, but just crude handling around the head and neck on young horses gets them a little standoffish. So I'll leave it with you there. I would just encourage you to put it to good use and get her flexible in your direction without crowding her face to do it. And I would also, I think I would also just look forward to the day and look ahead to the day where if she's really that fractious or unwilling to have you stand around her, you're going to have to really think about what it would be like if you have to get in a trailer with her up close and personal, with her at the head, or, you know, blocking her eye while you have to reach up over your head and tie her to one of those rings, or whatever else goes on. So just look at it from the better part, okay? And she's not biting you, she's not kicking you, she hasn't ripped the rope out of your hand. But that brings me to the point where there were several of you that wanted me to talk about these horses that do rip out of your hand, drop a shoulder and bail, pick them up in the next town or something. I don't know how far you have to go for them, but it is a drag, and it's also avoidable. And the first thing I would do if I had a horse that I would look at your contribution to the problem, and I would say, if you've got a horse that does this repeatedly, part of your contribution to the problem, I'm sorry to say, is going to be that you expect them to do this. So you hold your breath and get all braced up and get ready to resist their resistance to you. And, you know, by gosh, you resist them and they resist you, and they know how strong you're not, and they add an extra 1.5 pounds to your 60 or 80 kilos or your 140 or 60 or 80 or 200 pounds, and they just say, see you later. So I would, on this kind of horse, I might make sure that there were other things you did first besides try to trailer load one if you knew it was going to end up with you chasing him all over the neighborhood to try to get him back and start the program over again. That gets old fast. So I would in the first place, if you hadn't worked it out yet, I would say that what you could do is, I guess most of these horses are going to be bailing off to the right, so you're standing in the back of the trailer, a couple of you 2 or 3 of you gave me this one as an example of what to do if you wanted to have some input on how to fix it. I would just say, if you're standing at the back of the trailer waiting for your horse to find that moment where he's going to, you know, kind of look over his shoulder, because they'll do that, drop an ear, start to angle around so they can get that hip and that shoulder just right before they bail. If you're just watching and waiting and anticipating this moment, they are too, and you're both in it together. So I would not put yourself in the same situation. If this is what happens when you face them at the back of the trailer, then I would try driving them in instead. And if it's driving them in the process of trying to drive them in the trailer where they decide they're going to leave you high and dry, then I would either start driving them in from the other side or get someone to help you and show you how to load a horse. I did not mean this series of discussions here to these little presentations I'm doing for you to try to more just troubleshooting. I can't sit here in my, well, all these different places I am. I can't sit here and just teach you how to load a horse over the internet like this without the videos, and I've got tons of them. I just trying to get organized and get the know-how and get some support to put all this together for you. I've got data for years and years that I've been collecting as I've been learning things. You know, this is really important for me to share these things with you, and I feel it is. It's not going to do me any good driving around in my head all this information. So if some of it can help, that's why I'm doing this. But please don't think that this is a trailer loading instruction. I'm just mostly trying to point out some things that you can do that will save you a heck of a lot of trouble. That's the main part, is not to get in trouble with your horse, because in the end he might not be your horse forever, and if you didn't resolve the things that you got him into, that could make it pretty hard for somebody else. But look, there is something that oh, hi Brenda. I really like seeing all my pals on here, new pals and old pals, and I really hope I get to meet all of you someday, those of you who I haven't met. I saw some really interesting names on there today. I just wanted to reach out and shake hands with a couple of people today that jumped on there that I've heard about for years from Bill. And that was nice to see. I hope you feel I'm doing a good job. I'm doing my best. I don't know how long people watch these things. There's no earthly way for me to tell. But all I do know is that with all my heart and soul, I am trying to convey the things that are just not necessary to learn by, you know, the School of Hard Knocks is hard enough, and it got full enrollment. I've noticed that it doesn't seem to release anybody early. We all have enrolled, and I would like to just save you some of the coursework that I had to do. I have made loads of mistakes. I'm going to tell you about a couple of them right now. As a matter of fact, I've had a list of about 4 or 5 good trailer disasters, not accidents and things, but places where I just wasn't doing the right thing, and I'll tell you, or other people weren't either. And wow, I'll tell you about one. 1978, I would say. Was it 78? No. Close. Yes, it was. 78 or 79. Yeah, 79, I guess. I got a call from, this was over in Berkshire County. This is happened over in Egremont, Mass. In the, about October of 1979. I got a call, and I've had many calls like this since. Kind of a typical thing. Somebody thinks they're gonna get a horse and it's a baby, and they're gonna grow up with the baby, and they'll train the baby, and then they'll have a big horse and go riding. And they don't know about horses in the beginning of all this plan they have. Okay, so there you get the baby. Now, this particular horse, and many of them do, turn out to be little stallion babies. Well, little stallion babies grow into big stallion horses, and about 100% of them, minus maybe 1 or 2%, would make lovely geldings. So anyway, most people forget that part. And anyway, This was one of about 3 or 4 calls I've had in 40 years. Seems like once every 10 years somebody makes this boo-boo in my neighborhood and they call me up. The people have moved out. They gave up the horse long ago. They secured a fence for him. He's waiting there. The house is just about to change owners, or it has already, and the people are getting ready to move in, and here's this horse in the field. Well, there's a reason he's in the field, and that's because people don't catch him. People haven't figured out what to do with him. Maybe he's nice, maybe he's not nice, but a stud in a field, when you're the new owner coming in, unless you're a horse person and you like the look of him, I think most people would just soon have him off the property. It's a tremendous liability, and as nice as they are to look at, if they bite or kick or run away, there's not really much good they can do you if they need you. If they get hurt or something, and you don't know what you're doing, you can't catch one, can't walk up to them. So anyway, those are the calls I get periodically. I'm going to tell you 2 such stories right now, and then we're going to get to the sensitive and important subject of how you double a horse from the ground if you have never done it, and why it's important, and what does it have to do with trailer loading. It has a lot to do with these horses that drop a shoulder and bolt, that's what. And also, you know, you want to be able to send your horse around the corner and get in the trailer. So to double a horse just means to be able to turn him around at the end of a rope, sort of like a 180, and come on back to you. But on the way, they'll learn 90-degree angles too, which you need sometimes for maneuvering in and around these larger trailers, or getting up a ramp, or getting in between trailers at a fairgrounds, loading sideways, all kinds of configurations a horse might find himself in where he'd need to be pretty handy doubling himself. But I'll talk about that after I tell you. I drove out with my favorite little person in the world. I guess he was 3. So Taj and I went out there, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with this pony, but he was actually a large pony. He was a stud at the time. And it took quite a long time. Anyway, I did finally get a halter on him and a rope. And then, sure enough, he charged off. Can't quite remember the circumstances anyhow. I kind of lost him. Didn't have a long enough rope, which back in those days was, everybody didn't have a long enough rope. I think it might have been it was a dog leash kind of a rope. You got it down at the local feed store. $2.99, a 6-foot cotton, fuzzy, white, twisted cotton rope with a little 10-cent snap on it like that, and just a terrible thing. So I don't know why they have those, but anyway, he got loose with that. So I figured, well, I'll just hope he gets the point that he's leaving. And I did have a little bit of hay and grain for him, but not much. But I have to be honest, all I had was a Toyota pickup. That was it. Jump him right in the back. That was the plan. So what I did, that's the way we used to go to the horse shows when I was a kid. And I figured, well, I don't have a horse trailer, and I've just got this little truck that 3 men could pick up and flip over without even breaking a sweat, really. So I don't know why I thought I could do this, because I couldn't. Anyway, proud young man of 3 years old ended up loading that horse. I couldn't get him in. He wouldn't do anything for me. In the end, I couldn't catch him after I got him haltered. In the end, I couldn't load him. And in the end, 3.5-year-old boy loaded him. So it's one of those things that horses can make up a decision and decide, it was a fall day, it was cold. I didn't want this horse loose in the neighborhood. We weren't that far from a main road. Sometimes you just got to realize that someone who's 3 has got more impact on a scared, upset horse than someone who thinks they know what they're doing. That's how that went. Anyway, how did I get him in there? I got in the back of the truck. I had him hand me the end of the lead rope, and he followed instructions. He snapped his little fingers like that. Right behind the left hip, he went. And that little horse just jumped right in there after me, and then he was thinking about jumping out too. But I had a ring tied in a rope that went around the cab of the truck. I slammed both doors on that. You know, what are you going to do? You just run that rope around the top of your truck. And then I had a 4-inch metal ring tied in there. I just put his lead rope in there, tied a bowline, and got in and started driving. It was that simple. Drove him all the way through town, Great Barrington, back up into Monterey. That's where I was headed with him, and we drove him right down Main Street in that rig. And I mean, he just stood in the back of that truck. That was that. Okay, so that was 1978. 1988, I got a very similar call, and I was I was married at the time. We had my husband liked polo, and we had trail horses, and I had a little riding school, and there were days when I just wanted to hang my head and cry, and there were days when I thought it was going all right, and there were days when I was just plumb full of myself, and there's just all kinds of different emotions you go through when you're young and starting out in business, and you want to know more about what you're doing than you do. Anyhow, I knew one thing. I knew I could get along with horses, but anyway, my second scared black stallion, this was a Morgan stud they called Captain. Oh my God, I just realized what that is, Captain Morgan, oh my goodness. Anyway, his name was Captain. He was a Morgan, bigger than the last one, which had been, as I said, 10 years earlier. You'd think I might have learned something. I did. I learned to get him in a barn and try to halter him in there, and then have the trailer set up so that I didn't lose him. So I had that going for me. Anyhow, I could get him up to the back of the trailer, couldn't get him to budge. Tried everything. He was rearing up, and he was an upset horse. And I could see that in both these cases, these horses had been handled very impatiently by unqualified people. And just to the point where the horses realized how strong they were and how poor the timing the people had was. And you put a young stud through that half a dozen times, and they pretty well figure they don't have to do anything they don't want to do, and they're correct. So we didn't have much in the way of tools. I wasn't equipped to be dealing with studs like this. I just had a riding school full of little old young horses and a couple of old retired horses. It was a pretty modest, low-key kind of a deal. I wasn't ready for some strapping 6-year-old Morgan stud that didn't want to go in a trailer, and I also didn't know where in the heck I was going to put him. I didn't certainly have any stud pens, but we had an 8-horse trailer. I figured I could at least bed it down, feed him overnight, and take him somewhere in the morning. I could buy a few hours because, again, there in this case, the people, some sale was contingent on them removing the horse. So we went home. I had to go home and get a crop or something. Crop wasn't going to do it. I didn't own a lunge whip at the time, I don't think, or if I did, it wasn't my tool of choice. In the end, I think what was tried next was they were going to lock arms and kind of boost him in, but he kicked like hell. So in the end, it was a batter up, okay, softball bat. Going to just give him one swat over the butt and jump him in. Well, that's what the people I was working with thought would be just easy to do. We're not talking about beating the horse up with a baseball bat. Don't get the wrong idea. We are not talking about anything other than just getting him in that trailer, closing the door, and getting back to what we had to do all day long. But that's what was available, was that baseball bat. So they tried a couple times, locking arms behind him, throwing a little gravel at him. I was in the trailer. I'd learned something. I didn't have a little 6-foot cotton rope from Agway. I had a pair of them. They were tied together. 2 of them. So I had 12 feet. It still was barely enough. Anyway, if you can't laugh at yourself, just forget it. It was pathetic. Anyway, so here comes this whacking him over the butt with a baseball bat routine. And after about, he was sold up so badly, and I didn't know whether to jerk on him or pull or change position. I was not any expert trailer loader at all. I just knew that he had to get out of there, and I was going to be part of that process. So just about the time he hadn't paid attention to that baseball bat over his backside, and I want to tell all of you, we are not talking about cruelty. We are not talking about hitting him on the hip bones or the spine or the hocks, so just relax. But he was not going in, and, you know, what was my alternative? Turn him loose? Leave him there? So, after about 6 or 8 of those whacks, they were well spaced and well timed. There was some communication going. There was some time for the horse to think. And all of a sudden, Mickey Mantle decides he's going to hit a home run, and he just does it a little bit too hard. And just at that moment, before he made contact, that horse decided he was going to jump in. So Mickey Mantle lets go of the bat right as that horse jumps into my face, on top of me, slams me back in the front of the trailer, and the bat comes in with him. Then they slam the door and go to the front of the truck and drive off. Oh my God! Can you imagine that? Well, that was that. So that was that was a trip down memory lane for you. Just shared that one with you. So what did I learn? I learned a lot. It didn't have much to do with trailer loading either. It had to do with who you're loading the horse with. So that's an important choice. I hope you got a kick out of that. I remember it quite well. Those are things not to do. These are situations where you show up to try to help, and you're not only unqualified, as I was not in those days, for that level of raw, unloadable horse that people had failed with a number of times previously. So these are just examples of things. I guess I was probably 24 on that first one, or 22. I was 32 on that second one, so there was a 10-year gap. I think I'd improved a bit, but I hadn't made a practice of loading stallions that didn't want to get in trailers. So we did a little better, but no two loading situations are the same. I'll just tell you, it certainly does help to have a plan, good equipment, a trailer that you understand how it works, a trailer that you've examined well, something that isn't rusty, something that'll undo if you do it up. That would apply to doors and latches in places that need keys, doors and exit doors and tack compartments, and either a tack door or a tack compartment on your older style 2-horse trailers, and your back doors if it's a step up, or your ramp if it's you drop a ramp down and he goes up there. All these things really need to be well maintained. I know I've talked about this, and I'll just suggest also that you, because I spent a couple hours back there and some of these other ones that I've mentioned it, you want to make sure that your floorboards are good, that you have mats if you need them. Don't hesitate to get down on the ground and get dirty, and make sure you've got floorboards. Might look good in the middle of the trailer. Make sure the ends aren't rotting off in between those on that angle iron that holds them in, or that little lip with a metal cap on it there that'll run the length of your trailer. Just make sure you know that horse is going to get up on something that will hold him. And you remember to check your wiring, remember to check your lights, remember to check your brakes. If you don't know how to use brakes, don't be shy or embarrassed or hesitant to say so. Go down to Tractor Supply or go to an auto place or an RV place, and if you can't find somebody to teach you how to do some electric brakes, there are a lot of people on this Facebook that could tell you how or show you how, and I have half an idea you could go to Google that thing and somebody'd show you how to do it. Okay? You'll find somewhere, but don't just think because the guy who put the brake box in adjusted it that you're good to go. That is weight sensitive, it is road condition sensitive, and it is super important that you learn how to operate that and be confident in it before you load and go someplace. Okay, these horses really shouldn't be the guinea pigs for somebody learning how to use electric brakes. So, all right, now on to our next topic. I'll get back just for a minute to the to doubling. Okay, what's doubling? I'm going to just simplify this and say you're going to double back on yourself. You're going to go one way and you're going to double back and go the way you came. Okay, let's say that. Like you run down to, let's say you run down to your neighbors and you send your kid down there and you say you need to borrow 2 eggs and a cup of flour. Get your pancake breakfast going. That kid's going to go down and back. You're going to go down, you're going to double back. That's a term we know, right? It's a familiar concept. So if you're going to teach a horse to double for you, and he has never learned it, and you've never learned it, there's a gentle way to learn this, and you can do it in a couple of hours. I have some friends over in New York State that learned this in a couple of weekends, and they had a whole barn full of horses, maybe 20 of them. Beautiful, big, warm bloods. Amazing horses they had there, and still do, I think. And you want to be able to manage a horse in any circumstance. That means manage doesn't mean win a fight. Manage, control. You don't want to lose your dignity. You don't want the horse to have to sacrifice his dignity to get down the road together, to get into a trailer, out of a trailer, across a fairgrounds, into a new barn, out of an old barn, into a new pasture. Doesn't matter. Can you get along with him? So sometimes if a young horse gets worked up or there's a lot of other new inspiration around, new stimulus, a horse will get so excited you feel like you can't hold him. So if you've taught this horse to double, it means to come back to you. What it means is he has learned how to leave the slack in your hand. So if you have him, let's see here what I can use. Just a minute. I think I can use this. I use this cord off my hard drive. Okay, let's say this is your lead rope here. Okay. There's your horse right here, and here's you. So if you're going to double your horse, it means you'd lead him this way, and then you'd come right back around that way, and he'd come too. This is really bad example. Okay, we're just going to pretend it goes like this. Here you're leading your horse, and now you're going to go back, and he's going to come back with you without a fight. All right, so sometimes I used to see, I went to quite a few clinics in the 90s, and I saw a lot of guys, they'd kind of chase a horse to the end of the lead rope and then just whip him back around. They just jerk on his head as hard as they could and set their own feet and hips in the ground and just spin that horse out and jerk him back around, and that would be that. They do that a couple times on each side and then figure he was maybe ready to do who knows what, but certainly the assumption was, I think, once you doubled a horse a few times, is that he would follow a rein and go back in that direction with you if you asked him. Well, it never really looked like it to me. Excuse me. No, it never really looked like it to me. But that's the doubling I saw. I don't exactly know if that doubling is real doubling and really what is meant by doubling the old-fashioned way, because it's referred to, and you can find it in the Zane Grey books and in the Bauer books and all the old westerns. You can find it in Ernie Morris's books. You can find it in Bill Dorrance's book. But the point is, how are you going to do it? I'll tell you how I did it. It certainly helps immensely if you have gone to the trouble to separate the horse's understanding of changing posture from going somewhere. Okay, I'm sorry, I gotta just close this eye because it's closed. I can't, this is just something that happens sometimes. It's just tough. So, you're not here to look at that anyway, but I'm just gonna do this. All right, so, where was I now? Okay, so if you have separated the horse's ability to take his head in both directions, let's say you're going to position yourself right a little bit behind where that stirrup would be. You'd have your hip and your foot kind of in the middle of him, not right behind the elbow, a little bit farther back than that, so that really if he were saddled, you'd be just right behind that stirrup hanging down there. Okay, now you should be able to bring that head around laterally with a lead rope or a bridle rein, without him needing to disengage his hips or walk off. Now, if you've really done a good job with your preparations, he'll know the difference of when you'd like him to lunge around you or be sent by. He'll know when that is, because you'll have a different energy in your body. You're going to be able to. This phone, come on now. Sorry. Anyway, I guess it doesn't matter. He's going to be able to follow you and leave that slack with you, with his neck, and come around to the side. Or if you give another little indication with your body and you release the hip that's next to him, he should be able to pass around you in a circle or a half a circle because you've asked him to. So if you have those things separated, then doubling probably isn't even going to need to be something that you need to focus too much on. But for these horses that bolt, these horses that don't come back to you, there is a way to get them to do that and to understand that that's the right thing. And you would go to some wood somewhere or some stand of oak or maple or something that's got some stoutness to it, maybe some ironwood or beech trees. All of those trees will work. You don't want to do it on an apple tree or some sort of low branchy type of fruit tree or avocado tree or something. That's got too many branches. That's going to get you hung up. If you have to, you could, but I would rather see you on a bigger tree. And so what you do is you walk, you just send that horse on the other side of the tree, and then he comes around, he's looking right at you, and he'll have to make his way back off that rope. He has to arrange his feet in order to do that. It's not like he's a telescope and he's just going to suddenly suck back and give you the perfect, give you a roll back over the hips just to free that lead rope off a tree. But ultimately, in the end, the horses that cannot follow a field to turn once they've started to leave are the ones that would be good to teach them to double on the ground. And I prefer, instead of chasing them to the end of my lead rope and then jerking it back, I was so unimpressed with the results that got back in the 90s when I saw just about everybody doing it. I never really was convinced that that was the best way. I saw good hands get good results, but maybe it wasn't just for that. That was part of a whole landscape of choices they had. They could pick from any, they had tools far beyond what I was equipped with to convince horses that they should do things and do it in a right amount of time and in a close enough to the right way. I'm not just talking about tools of coercion. I'm talking about just enough broad base of skills and the foundation in themselves to be able to add that one piece where you sort of chase him to the end of the lead rope and snap his head back, and he'll come back before he hits the end of the lead rope. The reason I never liked doing that is that the horse always had a pretty good brace built in to him because he was expecting to be pulled on, and then when he wasn't pulled on, he was still kind of tight from the expectation, plus he was loaded heavily in the front end. So if you set it up a slightly different way, you're going to get a much more quickly. You'll get a horse that doesn't need as much correction and refinement, and correction for the possibility of later refinement. So I just think that if you're going to teach your horse how to do something, it should be done the right way if you can manage the time. So if you send your horse, you're walking with your horse, let's say, and you just step on one side of a tree, or you're going to hang back a little bit and lunge him around that tree. All of these things, when he gets to the end of that rope, he's going to find his way back, and then he'll have to do something. He'll have to work at the walk with his hips and with his mind, his ribs. He'll adjust the weight up and forward, then up and back, so that he can actually make a turn on the forehand and then a turn over the hocks to get out of that. So you'll have the benefit of setting him up to do the turns you really want to ride anyway. In the end, you teach him how to come off a tree that he's gotten on the other side of, without pulling him and shushing him and making it all some sort of quick little resolution to some the perception that there's been an error in your leading skills, or that you didn't keep track of him, therefore he ended up on the other side of the tree. I think that's money in the bank. I would call that a blessing and use it all I could, because 10 minutes later you're going to be on this horse that doesn't lead any better than the one that bolted, because it is the same horse. I mean, he doesn't ride any better than he leads into a trailer, because it is the same horse. It's a very good idea to start working on this doubling and on his ability to think his way through to following the feel of a change in direction by arranging his feet to deliver himself there. Okay, I know that's a lot of words, but these are important things. And one more fight at the back of a trailer is not what anybody needs. So there is the delicate matter of horses that are so heavy and so spoiled and so frightfully unfit to be loaded because they can't balance. Their whole lives have been lived in conflict with people. Those are the horses that I would tend to hobble first. And I don't mean hobble at the back of the trailer right before you load him, or hobble him when he's in there and ship him hobbled. I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about horses that have had such confusion about where to stand and with whom they are actually doing this. It's an exchange of blows, you know. Out of my way. No, out of my way. No, out of my way. No, I don't think you understand. You're in my way. If you've got that type of relationship with the horse, or you're sharing or leasing a horse that has got that input from other people that sort of bleeds into your relationship with him, I would be very, very careful to not tangle with him. Don't get on his bad side. I would have really a very empathic kind of deliberate way of just saying, look, buddy, when we get done hobbling, you're going to know what to do with your weight, and you're not going to need to lean on people anymore. You're going to learn that when your feet are up in the front, you've got 3 other feet you can rely on, and therefore you're going to become a safer horse. That's going to make me safer. You'll be a happier horse when I'm safer, because I'll let down my anxiety, and my energy will be more normal, and we're going to go have fun together. This thing about using hobbling for a punishment is out of the question. I was also wrong before. That's 4 words, not 3. It is out of the question to misuse that skill and that tool that way, because the horse will never understand it as a punishment. It will just be a misapplied, emotionally driven act of desperation to hobble a horse because you're mad. I would just not even dream of misusing the potential that that tool has to help build you an amazingly light and responsive horse who forgets all about where he used to put his panic, his negative energy, his sold up, reluctant, resentful attitude. There are horses, you know, human emotions don't wear real well on horses, and those things I just said are human qualities and traits that you can find in many horses that have not had the right approach to many things, including saddling, including bridling, including basic mounted and groundwork exercises, let alone the thumping some of these horses just get sort of as a matter of course at the back of the trailer just for showing up there. So it might sound as though I don't have anything nice to say about people or the prospect of trailer loading, but most of the people obviously get it done and get it done well. I'm talking about the things and to the people, hopefully, who need the help because they haven't had so much success. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a doomsday event to load a horse, or that all these bad things that can happen will happen to you, but I just think that forewarned is forearmed. And like Brian from Ireland said the other day, you want to plan for the unexpected. Have a good kit in your vehicle. Have a good emergency and first aid kit there for yourself and for your horse. Travel with water. You just do the things that you know are going to be essential and unavailable if you have a breakdown in the middle of traffic, or things just don't go right for a day or two and you're on the road. It's just really nice not to have to be too desperate out there. Just make sure that you make your plans so that you're self-sufficient, or you've got a good network of people to call if you're on a long trip who can provide you with emergency services if it's needed. And those networks are easier than they've ever been to identify.